Welcome back to another episode of Church is Stupid.
Comma but.
I'm Ruth.
Hi everybody, I'm Andy.
I'm Elijah. Hi everybody. I'm Elijah.
What was
I'm
that
very
name?
grateful,
I didn't
Elijah.
I didn't catch it. What was your name again?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Just
We've
check.
only said it twice, I
Because
think.
because Andy was like, "Hi everyone," and I was just like, "Yeah, that's me." So I felt like I had to change it after the fact.
You
know,
didn't
it's
want to say hi to people.
No,
it's actually really funny because I feel like we've gotten a nice little groove until we get to Elijah.
Well,
And then
even
it's just
when we have a guest, like, it's a better groove than this guy.
I know. It's why you're not listed
because
as
they're
a
looking to impress, and I don't care what you guys think of me.
You don't want to impress me anymore? Our marriage is in shambles, Elijah. Please.
For anyone listening, that's Andy, not Ruth talking.
It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I
sometimes.
was very good at disguising my voice.
Yeah, you sounded just like me. Anyhow, so on this week, we're going to be doing a special feature on a little holiday that's coming up. Y'all might have heard of it. It's called Easter! Woo!
I've never heard of this before.
It's Resurrection Sunday.
And on that note, we're just going to end it here, everyone. Have a great week.
That's a lie. We're not doing that because Ruth is
Easter.
on. But no, we are in the midst of Holy Week this week, and like that brings a lot of interesting things to light, like the amount of services that we have this week, the fact that this is like the end of the Lenten period, and many people celebrate Lent or like give things up for Lent, and they don't really know what they're giving things up for, or like different things like that. There's a lot of interesting like things that come up when you're dealing with Easter. And I think that for the first one that we can look at is that one that expresses back the most amount of time from this is Lent. Like it started almost 40 days ago, right? 40 days. It's 40 days long.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It started almost 40 days ago, and I know personally myself, I said, okay, I'm going to give something up for Lent.
What'd you
I
give
didn't.
up? Oh, okay. I was like, really?
I would have failed if I did so, because like during this time period, I end up stressing myself out, and like at one point it was going to be like chocolate and sweets, and I wouldn't have made it through this past week without chocolates and sweets.
That is the truth.
But it's kind of weird because that's not really what the Lenten period is made for. Like,
Well, and I think that Lent itself is probably the time that we see the most ritual within the church year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have Advent and Christmas season, but those always seem a little bit more, I think is it fair to say those always are a little bit more fun? Like, more upbeat, if that makes any sense?
yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Like,
I would agree with that.
It's more of...
well, it's celebrating something a lot less morbid.
yeah.
It's celebrating
Exactly.
the birth rather than
Whereas
death.
with Lent, we start with Ash Wednesday, which is like, you will all die and return to ashes, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Now
I mean,
mark yourself.
now mark your. Well, honestly, with
Here,
the
have
mark
a cross on the forehead.
Yeah.
the mark that death has been defeated, but also like it's kind of a morbid day, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And then we go through Lent, and then it's just very. To me, it feels a little bit more ritualistic than the Christmas season does, and especially as we come up to Holy Week, that on Palm Sunday you're gonna hear about Palm Sunday, and then that on Easter you're gonna hear about the resurrection, or I'm sorry, on Resurrection Sunday, as certain people decided to sass me about. Not naming names since they've already been named 14 times on this podcast.
Hi everyone.
He's Elijah.
But yeah, I mean, and that's not to say there's not joy and beauty found within the Lent season, but I think as an outsider to the church, somebody who maybe doesn't spend as much time looking in, you kind of know a little bit what to expect during Advent and working up into Christmas season. I feel like Lent, it's not quite the same. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I feel like what's coming up every year. Like, it's the same every year after every year, but it's completely ritualistic. So, like, in that sense of what you were saying.
Yeah, but if you're not familiar with the church, it might not be as... Like, you'll know Easter and you'll know Christmas, but you won't necessarily...
Even if you are familiar with the church in other denominations, maybe he might not even know, because I don't really think I knew that Lent was a thing growing up, but I don't particularly remember ever putting any emphasis on it within our church, at least as much as the UMC does. Same thing with Advent. I mean, we would talk. I'm pretty sure we would talk about the Advent season, but we didn't really have the same, from what I remember, the same kind of Advent traditions or Lent traditions, like, at all. So it really wasn't until I became a part of the UMC in some ways, that I really actually even really learned about what they look like.
So was it like, poof, here's Christmas, poof, here's Easter?
Well, I think you gradually taught him about both things.
No. I mean, like, in the non-denominational church you grew up. Like, was it literally just like normal Christmas?
Well, I'm having a tough time remembering precisely how it went and how it felt like in our church service compared to, like, the youth group, because the youth group was taking up more of my time and attention than the actual, like, Sunday church service that the youth group was, like, a part of. So there may have been more involvement that I can remember, but from what I remember learning about or even really taking part in, like, I sort of kind of, to answer your question, I think in a way, yeah. At least, like I said, on my part, I don't want to misrepresent what actually may have really happened, but I really don't remember. At least, like, tradition wise, you know what I mean? Like our church putting, like, an emphasis on taking part in those traditions as much.
And that's fair. I knew about the Lent and Advent seasons long before I became so even before I would have been in youth groups and things like that, I was raised in those traditions.
Yeah.
But before we get too far into that, Andy, I know you love to talk about the reason why you give up stuff for Lent, and why it's more than just giving up stuff. You brought it up a little bit.
I love to talk about that subject. That is my favorite subject in the entire world.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, Mr.
You're
Sarcasm.
always talking about Lent and the reason behind it. You're constantly talking about it.
I'm constantly talking about the things
That's
that
like
we
your
give up for Lent.
favorite thing to bring up at dinner every single time.
Well,
every time he streams on Twitch, all of that stuff, it's just constantly Lent.
Apparently you haven't watched my streams of late because they haven't been happening. But no, this Lenten, like, giving up something for Lent, like, dates back to the idea of fasting and, like, Jesus fasting in the desert, or name a time Jesus is fasting.
Well, Lent specifically is for the time. Sorry, I'm going to be the obnoxious church person. It is specifically for the time that he fasted 40 days in the desert. And I know you know that, but I'm telling that to everybody else.
Why I said it first.
I know. I just...
But it's this...
I'm sorry, okay?
Andy, why don't you tell us what you love about Lent? Now, hold on. Before you finish that thought, let me just say.
Here's the history behind it, because you're wrong. But I said that. Okay, but no, it's this...
just teasing you.
Like, fasting, which has kind of, I'm going to say, devolved since, like, the biblical times. Like, you see... Well, I guess, sorry, and this... I don't know how to say this and not be just a prick about it. Like... Jewish people, they celebrate fasting, and they do so phenomenally. But when you look at like, when Catholics or Christians are called to fast, or they feel the calling to fast, like, I think I've seen one person in my life who's not a part of Judaism, like, do a successful, like, a real fast, and that was my roommate from college, Tyler, who, like, I watched him, and he's struggled with, like, the actual fasting of it. Like, I could see the drain that it was putting on him, like, to, like, actually be fasting. But yet he was spending so much time in prayer and in the Word, and he was, like, actually getting, like, what you're supposed to get out of fasting. But then we see this, like, Lenten time come around, and it's become the secular thing to be like, oh, I'm using Lent to give up chocolate or something like that. And it's not the same. Do you guys kind of see where I'm...
I 100% know what you're saying, because I think the idea of fasting is supposed to be such a sacred act, and I definitely think that it's been sort of trivialized a lot. I don't know. I think it's the right word I'm thinking of, but
Well, and I'd probably say the Protestants do it worse than the Catholics, if you want me to be honest on that one. Just because at least I believe Catholic teaching is very much geared toward whether or not the practice. I can't say that because every Catholic church is different. Just like every Protestant church is different. They tend to hold more to like, this is the tradition of what it was, whereas the Protestant church is like tradition. I mean,
tradition.
it's really funny that we're talking.
our tradition started when Martin Luther in the 1500s. No,
Gotcha.
Sorry, continue. Allegedly.
It's funny that we're talking now that we're actually talking, or you use the word fasting. I'm now remembering. It may have been Lent or it may have been for other teachings as well, but I do remember in our church a lot of different times where we would talk about fasting. We would be encouraged to fast because of Jesus's 40 days in the desert. And I'm remembering that. That's it's like you made it come back to me because I am remembering that. I just don't remember if it was Lent specific or not. I would assume it probably actually would be. But I am familiar with that, and I do remember some of the ways that it was that some people would do the thing that you were kind of saying where, I'm giving up chocolate, haha. What I don't know.
Well, even so, like if you say I'm giving up chocolate, like isn't supposed to be like a fast. I don't know the rules for a fast because I've never I've seen one person like actually do it. So Ruth, if you want to jump in at any time, but let me say what like I think they are, and then feel free to correct me, or go ahead and Google it on your phone, and then you can correct me.
I want to jump in and be rude again. So,
but like as far as I know, it's like during the day, you're able to drink water, and I don't fully know most of the rules, but I think like you're able to eat once the sun goes down, right? Like you're able to eat certain things, and then on Fridays or in preparation for the Holy, you're like, I don't know, Ruth, why don't you correct me?
Thanks for trying, Andy.
Actually, he's talking about a very specific kind of fast.
I was wondering
and so
because
that is a certain type.
Some fasting I know is specific to nourishment, right? Yeah. And other people can also use the word fast and just to symbolize giving up something or anything, right?
The traditional fasting, usually around like holidays and things like that, usually revolved around the sun. You could eat when the sun went down, but not all fasts are like that. There's also things called like the David fast, which is eating like fruits and berries and things like that. For the however long you choose to do a David's fast. Ultimately, the premise of fasting is that you take the time that you would be doing, like you would be eating, and you spend it in prayer and in time with God. So it's intentionally setting aside time for God and showing that God is all the nourishment you really truly need. And so a traditional fast can be one where you eat after sundown, and it also doesn't have to be. So it really kind of depends on what you're going for. And it also depends on how long you want to fast. For instance, a longer fast usually tends to be the one where, I'm not going to eat during the day, but I'll eat after the sun goes down because you still need food. But
I didn't know that there were so many, or that there were at all like different types of fasts.
There are.
At least, because I knew that fast is sort of a generalized term, or at least it's used that way now. But I didn't know that there were actually, in regards to like ones that involve, food, that there were different, like literal different defined types.
There are, and I'm sure there's more than I've mentioned. But essentially, the whole premise is you give up something to spend more time with God, and we've sort of trivialized it to a sense of, and it's not wrong to give up chocolate. You want to give up chocolate during Lent? Hey, more power to you. I used to give up pop during Lent. I never. My friends started to beg me not to.
Yeah, no, I can see that you're not doing that now.
No, I am not. I have my cherry Coke on the table. But it's interesting how it's kind of developed in this. And I think the reason that chocolate has become sort of the fasting go-to is because, like, in your Easter egg baskets or Easter egg hunt, like, you would get chocolate. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to wait until that day, and then I'm going to give you all the good stuff, which
it's
is
also
sort of
viewed as, like, indulgent, isn't it?
It is. Well, and that's why what's interesting is there's also a thing before Lent called Fat Tuesday, which also, I believe, is Mardi Gras? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I was like, I think that's Mardi Gras. Anyhow, the whole purpose for that day, that indulgence day, is to get in as much as you can before you have to give it up. Which also kind of takes away a little bit of
yeah.
But I also understand if I was gonna give up pop, I'd probably drink at least one the day before I had to be like, yeah.
Right.
But it's supposed to be something that's really a spiritual transformation. It's not supposed to be something that's just sort of this frivolous, I'm going to do something, I don't know. I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. Some people even equate fasting to, like, I'm going to take a Facebook fast or a social media fast or stuff like that, which I think in theory could very well be a fast in a sense if they're spending that time that they would spend on Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or the millions of things that I don't know because I'm old. And they spent it in prayer. I think that would qualify. But Lent itself is based again on that 40 days that Jesus spent in the desert, which was a very literal fast. No food. Mm-hmm. But also, I apologize, I didn't address the water. Yes, they can have water usually when they do the fasts where they don't eat throughout the day but anyhow,
so we talked a lot about Lent and the mentality and the reasoning behind Lent and behind fasting. What I'm trying to form a question off of what I'm thinking, and it's actually harder than I thought it would be, but I guess I'll just say it. There's a lot of people who don't really know what the actual sole purpose of, like, that tradition is for.
The tradition of fasting?
Like specifically Lent, right? Like specifically fasting in Lent or fasting for Lent. I don't know how to say it. Right. I mean, it's pretty safe to say that, like, there's probably a lot of people who don't know, like, the history and the reasoning behind why people do it fully, or at least why people used to do it in some cases. So are people doing something wrong if they don't take part in it, or if they're taking part in it in a way that isn't directly giving up food? If a Christian goes through Lent or passes Lent by and just doesn't feel like doing anything, like, are they sinning, or are they doing something actually wrong? Or would you say that that's strictly that it's strictly church tradition that is good, or that can be good, but isn't something that's, like, required to be a Christian, I guess?
Well, golly gee, gumdrops.
And I'm only asking this because, I mean, I'll be the first to admit, like, for this Lent season, I really didn't pay any mind to it at all. I didn't really give up anything. I didn't really even think about it. And I haven't been. But when we talk about Lent outside of Lent, like, actually happening, when it's brought up in other subjects, we talk about it. And I do actually, when I'm thinking about the reasoning behind everything, I think the idea of fasting for a spiritual transformation is actually a really wonderful and humbling and, like, beautiful thing. I really do believe that. And yet I really haven't truly taken part in Lent in a while, or ever. So on top of, like, it being a personal thing, like, that you should be encouraged to do, what role do you think it plays, like, taking part in Lent and knowing the reasoning behind it? What role does that really play in being a Christian, if that is a valid question, in your opinion?
Well, I think it plays a lot less of a role in being a Christian than it does in some other faiths. I think that like it's become this like disconnect time, and it's just kind of like a period on the calendar nowadays. It's no longer like the drastic like, oh, Easter is coming, we need to fast, we need to do all of these kind of things. Like traditional senses have like we've seen them like falling off as far as like the church goes, because people want to live their own lives and they don't want to be affected on the day to day by all these
Like
different things.
preparing for a church holiday as opposed to preparing for a time of the year where you deliberately go through spiritual like transition almost. Where it's almost like marking off a date instead of preparing yourself to sacrifice something. Like actually. Is that a fair?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
She breathed in like she was going to say something.
Oh, okay.
I know it was a completely like random and suddenly heavy question, but I mean, if the idea behind Lent actually is something very intentional and like I would say pretty serious with like serious intentions, you might as well ask or you know, and kind of dive into what, you know, where does it lie nowadays and where should it lie, I guess. If there's even an answer, I'm just bringing it up, you know.
Well, it's kind of an older tradition, fasting kind of thing. Like it's not like we go on diets now or something like that. Like
the keto fast.
Yeah,
right?
it's like what we do today isn't as much equivalent because we don't take the spiritual time that we used to, kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not going to call somebody a bad Christian because they don't fast during Lent, because it's not like if I needed to feel spiritually closer, then I would go out of my way and I would do it myself. But I wouldn't like force it upon anybody else. Like again, my roommate who did it, like I watched him go through it, and it was hard. Like he was suffering while he was like doing this, but he was growing spiritually in his faith.
And you would probably say that he knew why he was doing it, and he wasn't just feeling like he was forced to because of tradition.
He definitely knew what he was doing, and like he was one of the greater like Christian minds of like my college like era. He was really driven by his faith, and so like doing something like this was like, yeah, I'm going to fast because I have been feeling a disconnect as of recent, and I want to get back to that place where I know like I have a strong rock and a strong foundation. But it's not like this, oh, it's this time of year, it's time to fast. It was I'm feeling called that I need to fast. Okay. I guarantee I know the guy, and I know that he doesn't for Lent like give up something for Lent because it's become trivial. It's become
right.
Oh, we're a part of society. I'm expected to give up chocolate for Lent, or like different kinds like that. It's no longer the spiritual like rock that it used to be.
Lent specifically.
Lent specifically. Like individual fasting, like that's. I think individually for people that's still a very large spiritual rock, and something that I don't think I could do.
Right.
I'm a bigger guy. I enjoy my food. I could probably attempt a David fast or a different type of fast.
Okay.
And I probably would grow spiritually from that, but after seeing like what it caused to my roommate after that period of time, like I know a normal fast isn't something for me, kind of thing.
Okay.
So, yeah. I agree, and I also sort of disagree, or maybe not disagree as much as care to elaborate slightly.
I'm curious.
I do think there is a necessity in feeling called to fast, and I think the church has done a very, very poor job in articulating the importance of why we do Lent.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of people who truly don't even know that the reason that we give things up is because it's based on the fasting and the 40 days and spiritual growth and things like that. And it's also sort of interesting to me because Lent has such an unusual place in secular society as well, where like I said, it starts with Mardi Gras and it ends with Easter, which are relatively celebrated regardless of your status of being a Christian or not. I don't know that, whatever, regardless.
Yeah.
But also, like, McDonald's would, because in a lot of Catholic traditions, they have to eat fish on Fridays. I think that's the thing. And so McDonald's would do like a fish fillet that they would have like a special on every Friday for the season of Lent, like
That's just
purposely.
good business.
I mean,
but like, I mean, it sounds weird, but it's the different ways that it's kind of affected society outside of the church as well.
Yeah.
But I think, as much as I believe that fasting can be and is a personal experience, I think there's also something beautiful in the communal aspect as well. In, like, imagine a church that dedicates for a year for Lent to say, we're going to ask you guys, if you can, to fast in your own way. And we're going to be praying about the direction of this church. We're going to come together, maybe not all of us, but intentionally sets, I'm thinking like a community of believers. I'm not thinking necessarily like a building, but a community of believers that says, we're going to commit to praying and to spiritual growth and doing this together and growing as a church. I think that that's a great example of the body of Christ. And I think that's why, because I just have to clarify that, because I think we've moved very individualistic in our faith, and I think there's some strengths to that. I think that personal relationship is important because I believe God loves every person, but I also think we've steered away from that communal aspect that we really could benefit from. There's stuff that we talk about. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we love doing this podcast, is that each one of us has a little bit to add to the conversation, and then one of us just never shuts up, like me.
Well, I love that you bring up the community aspect part, because we're also in this time period. I actually don't know if we're in the time period, but of Ramadan in the Islamic tradition, which is the community fasting. I don't think that we're actually in the period, but like it's around this time of year. But like it's that communal fasting where everybody, like, who's in your faith community is fasting with you if you are able, and like they set times during every single day for their prayers, and it's kind of beautiful, the tradition that it is. But speaking as a Christian and as a United Methodist in particular, we don't meet during the week. Church is a Sunday thing, like it's become that kind of a thing, and so we lose this mentality of living our lives as a part of this community of believers and this community of faith. And so it's very much so religion has become the personal. It's no longer the community.
And I think that's to our own detriment in a lot of senses. And Ramadan actually is April 13th through Wednesday, May 12th. Sorry, I wanted to look it up.
It was around this time of year. I knew that much.
I just was curious when you said it. I was like, when does it happen? But yeah, no, I think you made a lot of valuable points. It's hard for me because I think that just because we see what it's become now doesn't mean that it's not worth anything, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, just because it's become trivial, I think that there's a real opportunity for us to start going back and looking at the reasons, instead of what tends to be our natural reaction is to throw things out. And we see that with a lot of tradition. We say, all right, we're going to throw this out, we're going to throw this out, we're going to throw this out, because we just don't want any part of it. And then we start from scratch. And then it's funny because then we build our own traditions that eventually cycle back and get thrown out. Whereas if we really went back to the roots of why the tradition exists, I think we could benefit from a lot of that. And instead of necessarily, I mean, there are still some traditions that we could throw out, but maybe we could be enriched by realizing that we've not necessarily been practicing Lent the way that we could be.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of churches, like you said, we don't really meet the rest of the week. I love the idea of a church community being so close that they would want to pray for direction for 40 days, that they would want to be growing in their relationship with God. And to me, that's what church is, which is why I've found church more in groups of friends than I usually have within church buildings. But yeah, I think that would be my only I guess it wasn't really pushback to what you guys had said, but more of like,
That's a good point, though.
I think
For
it's
sure.
a way to bring it back around to potentially being really cool.
We are definitely pushing the time limit on this episode, and
yeah,
I
my
know that we
timer's
want
about
to
a
keep
minute
going.
behind.
Yeah.
But we will be back here. Yep, on Thursday. So
Maybe we'll actually talk about Easter instead of just Lent this time.
well, I think it's
I-
it's
no,
a
no,
good-
it's great.
We're still in
was
this
it?
Lenten
Yeah.
period. We should have done this 40 days ago about.
I'm sure we'll follow up a little bit on what we were saying and then transition into Easter or something. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So for all of us here at Church is Stupid,
Comma, but
I'm Andy,
I'm Ruth.
I'm Elijah.
and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your week.